That's all I managed to get out. Not yelled. Not whispered. Just said. Because when your wife defends another man in front of 12 people and then tells you you're embarrassing her, your brain doesn't rush. It freezes. This wasn't just some awkward moment at dinner. No, it happened in the middle of a heated debate. A real one. About something I actually cared about. Her coworker, Carter. I had heard too much about him already, had started ranting at a work event about how some people are just naturally built to lead, and others are more suited to follow quietly. I'd made a quiet joke, something like, right? Because being loud always means being right. It wasn't aggressive, just dry humor. He didn't laugh. She didn't either. Instead, she leaned in, and said, "You always get defensive when men like him speak confidently. Why does it bother you so much?" Everyone turned. Like I was a heckler ruining the show. Like I didn't belong at my own wife's table. That's when the wine glass in my hand started trembling. I wasn't angry. Just humiliated. Confused. Betrayed. I stared at her and realized I didn't recognize the expression on her face. It was admiration. Not for me. For him. She didn't stop there. She added, honestly, "Carter's just saying what most people think. You always make things about your feelings." People awkwardly looked at their plates. Someone coughed. Carter chuckled and took another sip of his drink. That's when I stood up. Not to shout. Not to storm off. I said one thing. Just one sentence. "Then maybe he should sleep on your side of the bed tonight." Silence. Actual silence. No one spoke. Carter looked down. She blinked like I'd slapped her with a cold rag. Someone at the end of the table excused themselves. I calmly walked out and waited in the car. She didn't follow me for 43 minutes. And when she finally did, she didn't sit next to me. She got in the back seat. There's so much more to this, more than I ever expected. What happened after that night shattered what little trust one had left. And yeah, I know how this sounds, but I'm not trying to be dramatic. I just want to know, am I crazy for thinking that one moment wasn't just disrespectful, but revealing? The next morning, I didn't wake up to her. She never came to bed. I found her on the couch, still in her cocktail dress, scowling at her phone like it had betrayed her. I stood in the kitchen doorway, silent. She didn't notice me at first. When she finally did, her eyes didn't hold guilt, just annoyance. "You really embarrassed me," she said, flatly. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent the entire night replaying the moment, her words, the way she leaned toward Carter like I wasn't even there, and the way everyone seemed more uncomfortable with me calling it out than with her crossing the line. I wanted to ask her what exactly I embarrassed her from. Dignity? Loyalty? Professional image? But instead, I asked a different question, one that had been rattling in my throat for weeks. "Are you emotionally involved with him?" She looked at me like I had just accused her of murder in front of her family. Then she laughed. Not like a person who thought it was funny, but like someone trying to bury a panic attack under noise. "That's paranoid," she said. "You're reading into everything like always." I almost believed her. Until I saw her phone light up on the coffee table. I didn't need to grab it. The preview message said everything. "Carter, last night was intense. You okay?" I meant everything I said. My stomach dropped. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just stared at her until she reached over and flipped the phone upside down, not because of what I saw, but because she saw that I saw it. I sat down across from her and asked again, slower this time, "Are you emotionally involved with him?" She didn't answer. She just stood up and walked out of the room. Later that day, I got a call from someone I didn't expect, her sister, Gina. She and I had barely spoken in years, but she must have heard about the dinner party. Her first words weren't, "How are you?" They were. I told her Carter was trouble. She didn't listen. She never listens. I asked Gina what she meant, and she hesitated. Then she sighed. "They've been texting constantly. She told me Carter gets her in a way you never did." I thought she was just venting. But the way she's been acting? I think she's crossed a line, Daryl. I wanted to throw my phone. I wanted to scream, to run, to rewind 6 months and shake myself for not trusting my instincts. But instead, I did what I always do. I stayed quiet. That night, I walked into the bedroom. She was already there, scrolling her phone like nothing was wrong. I stood in the doorway and said, "I'm not going to fight for someone who's already given herself to someone else, even if it's just emotionally." She didn't even look up. She said, "Then don't." I slept in the guest room. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't dream of her. I dreamed of what it would feel like to leave. I never thought a single morning could rewrite my entire understanding of someone. But that's exactly what happened the next day. It started with a missing charger. I know, that sounds small. Pathetic, even. But I had a work call coming up and couldn't find the cord I always kept in the drawer by the kitchen counter. She sometimes borrowed it, so I checked her office space, the little makeshift desk setup she carved out when she started working from home a couple days a week. That's where everything began to unravel. The charger wasn't there, but her laptop was still open and not locked. That might not sound significant, but Lorna always locked her screen, even when she went to refill her coffee. She was obsessive about privacy. So seeing her laptop just sitting there, glowing, as if inviting me to look, it froze me in place. I didn't want to snoop. I swear to you, I didn't. I hovered my hand over the mouse for a full minute. I even turned around once, told myself to walk away. But then I thought about her silence the night before. About that message from Carter. About the way she didn't say no when I asked if she was emotionally involved. I clicked her inbox. And I swear, it felt like watching someone walk into their own surprise party, except the surprise was betrayal. The subject lines were enough. Loved our talk last night. Still thinking about your voice, that thing you said on the balcony. All from Carter. Dozens of emails. I opened one. He'd attached a photo. It was cropped too tight. Her hand was visible, holding a wine glass. His voice, in the text, you always look so alive in moments like this. He doesn't see that version of you, does he? I opened more. Each one chipped away at something inside me. Emotional intimacy. Subtle innuendo. References to our little bubble. She never once corrected him. She never once mentioned me. Then I found the calendar entry. Meeting offsite strategy, 7 p.m., Wednesday. That was 2 days ago. She told me she was at a client dinner. She came home at midnight. My hands started shaking. I backed out of the inbox, heart pounding. I took photos with my phone. I didn't even know why. Maybe I needed proof not for her, but for myself. To stop gaslighting my own intuition. When she finally came downstairs that morning, she acted normal. She poured her coffee, asked if I wanted toast, and casually mentioned she'd be working late again, quarterly review season. She smiled. I stared at her like she was a stranger impersonating my wife. She noticed. What? She asked, tilting her head. I didn't reply. Not directly. Instead, I asked, what time is your offsite strategy session tonight? She flinched. Not physically, just in her eyes. Like a nerve I pressed without touching. I don't know what you mean, she said too quickly. You put it in your calendar, I said, carefully. Last week, too. And the week before that. She went quiet. Then she turned it on me. So you're spying now? That's what we're doing. I laughed. Out loud. I don't think I've ever done that in anger before. It wasn't a joyful sound. It was hollow and bitter, the kind of laugh that cracks in the middle. You know what's crazy? I said. I didn't need a password to find out you've already left this marriage. You left it in drafts and photo attachments in your calendar. She didn't deny it. Not a word. She just picked up her coffee and walked out the front door. Calm as you like. Like she knew it was over. But here's the thing she didn't know, that I had already booked an appointment. Not with a therapist. With a lawyer. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who shows up unannounced at another man's office. But there I was, standing in the polished, over-designed lobby of Lorna's firm, waiting to meet Carter. Not to punch him. Not to scream. Just to look him in the eye. I don't even know what I expected to happen. Some kind of closure? A breakdown? An apology? Something human. I had called ahead pretending to be a client, told the receptionist I was interested in discussing a branding project, and had heard Carter was exceptional. She practically swooned over the phone. Said he was finishing up a meeting and could squeeze me in. The irony wasn't lost on me. Squeeze me in. When he finally walked into the reception area, he looked even more insufferable in person. Perfectly fitted shirt, sleeves rolled up like he'd just gotten done solving global peace, and that same careless grin I'd seen in pictures on Lorna's work events. I stood to shake his hand. He didn't recognize me. I introduced myself as Daryl. Just Daryl. And I watched carefully, because if anything gave me away, it would be his face. Nothing. We stepped into one of those sleek, glass-walled mini-meeting rooms where everyone can see you but not hear a thing. He offered me water. I declined. I'll be honest, I said. I don't have a project. I just needed to meet you. I'm Lorna's husband. That smile of his? Gone. It didn't vanish slowly. It collapsed like a building under its own weight. His eyes darted for half a second toward the glass wall, maybe to see who was watching. She's told me a lot about you, he said finally. His voice dropped in volume. Measured. like I was a lawsuit waiting to happen. I leaned in, elbows on the table. Yeah? Because she hasn't told me much about you, aside from how often you like to call after 11 p.m. He shifted in his seat. For someone so proud of his confidence, he sure folded fast under real tension. He didn't deny anything, didn't argue, just gave me this thin, corporate version of a non-answer. I think maybe you should talk to her about that. I already did, I replied. She lied. We sat there in thick, quiet air. And then, almost as if he couldn't help himself, he muttered something so condescending it actually stunned me. Listen, man, these things happen. Sometimes people just grow apart. Grow apart? I felt my entire chest tense. The guy who had been whispering about my wife's voice, who had been drinking wine with her on balconies during strategy sessions, was now giving me breakup cliches like he was coaching me through a divorce he helped engineer. I stood up. Before I left, I said one more thing, something that wasn't angry, but maybe should have been. She might have fallen for your charm, Carter. But let me tell you what you don't know. When she's not with you, she still sets the dinner table for two out of habit. She still sleeps curled up like she expects me to be behind her. And no matter how much you talk, you'll never learn how she stops in the middle of brushing her teeth to sing under her breath. You don't know her. You just get her highlights. He didn't say a word. I walked out of that office calm, but shaking inside. I didn't go home. I sat in my car in the parking garage for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel, wondering when my marriage had become a three-person game I didn't sign up for. But later that night, something unexpected happened. Lorna came home early. No warning. No phone call. Just walked in through the door looking like she hadn't slept in days. And in her hand was an envelope. She said she had something to tell me. But whatever I thought it would be, I wasn't ready for what came next. I didn't say anything when she handed me the envelope. I didn't have to. The way she extended it, shoulders tense, eyes barely meeting mine, told me everything I needed to know. Something inside it would hurt. Something final. We were standing in the middle of the living room, still surrounded by the quiet clutter of a life we had built but clearly no longer shared. The soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen was the only sound, like a backdrop to a scene I didn't want to be part of. I took the envelope and opened it slowly. Inside, there were exactly three things: a folded sheet of paper, a printed photo, and a receipt. The photo was first. A hotel hallway, dimly lit. Carter and Lorna standing close. Too close. His hand was on her lower back, her mouth half open in mid-laugh, their shadows melting into one. It wasn't graphic. It didn't need to be. That level of intimacy, unguarded, casual, familiar, cut deeper than anything explicit ever could. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I needed confirmation of the obvious, but because I was frozen in a kind of slow-motion collapse. The moment your heart realizes what your mind already knows but has been trying to reject for weeks. The receipt was from the same hotel. 1 room. 2 nights. Paid in cash. She didn't try to explain it away. Didn't say it was a mistake, or that it was just a meeting. She didn't deny it because she knew denial wouldn't survive this kind of evidence. Then I opened the paper. It was a letter. In her handwriting. Daryl, I know you deserve more than a letter, but I don't know how to say this out loud without breaking. I never meant to hurt you. I don't think I even realized I was drifting until I was already somewhere else. You gave me safety, comfort, predictability. But Carter made me feel noticed, seen in a way I haven't felt in years. I hate myself for that. And I know you probably hate me now too. I wish I could undo the damage. I wish I could tell you I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did. And I can't lie anymore. I just hope, somehow, someday, you'll understand why I'm doing this. There was no "I love you" at the end. Not even a sorry. Just her signature. Just Lorna. I stood there holding the letter as she sat on the armrest across from me, hugging her knees like a child waiting for punishment. But I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask questions. Because the one question I wanted to ask, when did I stop being enough for you? I already knew she couldn't answer without tearing me apart further. Instead, I said something even I didn't expect. I went to see him. Her head snapped up. Her expression changed, like she hadn't calculated that possibility. I needed to see the man who took everything I never thought I'd lose. I continued. And you know what? He didn't have to say a word. His silence told me exactly how little this meant to him. She looked panicked now. Daryl. But I cut her off. You didn't just cheat on me. You gave the deepest parts of yourself to someone who wouldn't even know what to do with them. Her face crumbled. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I took the envelope, put it back together, and walked into the bedroom. I pulled out a suitcase from the closet. not hers. Mine. She didn't ask where I was going. I think part of her knew she'd just watched something permanent break in me. And yet, as I zipped the bag, I felt this strange, gut-twisting mix of grief and relief. Like letting go of a rope I'd been clinging to with bloody hands. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because 3 days later, someone else reached out to me. Someone I didn't expect, who had been watching this unfold from the inside. And what he told me about their affair. It made everything I'd seen so far look like child's play. I spent the first 2 nights at a cheap motel off the interstate. No luggage except the small duffel bag I packed in 30 seconds. No plan. Just the hollow kind of silence that sinks into your bones and makes everything you thought you knew feel like a joke you didn't get. I left my phone on silent, but I couldn't stop checking it. A part of me, some pitiful, irrational part, expected her to text. To say something. Anything. But Lorna never did. Not a single word after handing me the envelope. That silence made what happened next even more shocking. On the 3rd day, I got a message. Not from her. Not from Carter. It was from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Declan, Carter's assistant. We'd met only once at a charity auction Lorna dragged me to. He was quiet, polite, forgettable in the way most corporate assistants are trained to be. But now he was messaging me directly, with a simple line that made my chest tighten. I don't know if this is my place, but you should know he's done this before. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. He responded instantly, almost like he'd been waiting. Within an hour, we were sitting across from each other at a diner not far from the office where this whole nightmare began. Declan looked nervous. His knee bounced under the table, and he kept glancing at the door, like Carter might walk in at any moment. He's done this to other women, he started, voice low. At least 3 that I know of. 2 married. One of them left her husband and regretted it within weeks. She tried to come back, but Carter, he cuts them off the second the thrill is gone. I swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? He looked me straight in the eye. Because I watched him do it to my sister. She worked here before me. Same story. Married. Vulnerable. He love-bombed her, turned her against her own husband, told her she was wasting her life. When she finally left everything for him, he stopped returning her calls within a month. Said she was too emotional. She's in therapy now, barely holding it together. I sat there stunned. He reached into his coat pocket and slid over a flash drive. Screenshots. Recordings. Messages. I shouldn't have them, but I started saving stuff when I realized he wasn't just arrogant, he was calculated. You're not the first husband he's blown apart. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Because deep down, I'd always wanted to believe it was just a mistake. That Lorna was confused. Misguided. That maybe I could have fixed it. But hearing this, it reframed everything. It meant she wasn't just seduced, she was targeted. I took the drive, thanked him, and left without touching my coffee. Back in the motel, I plugged it into my laptop with trembling hands. The folders were organized by date. Declan had been watching this for months. One video stood out immediately. A screen recording of Carter sharing his screen in a Zoom meeting while forgetting to mute his notifications. A message had popped up during the call. You're right. She's ready. I've been pushing her harder this week. The recipient? Another contact labeled HL. I clicked deeper. There were voicemails too. One where Carter laughed and said, another one ready to burn the whole thing down. They always think I'm the escape. I sat there staring at the screen, not even realizing tears were running down my face. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a con. A man who hunted lonely women in high-stress jobs, fed their insecurities, inflated their egos, then shattered their lives for sport. And my wife, walked straight into his trap. Or worse, maybe she knew. Maybe part of her liked the danger. The attention. Maybe that's why she never told him to stop. But that wasn't even the most horrifying part. In the final folder, labeled Archive, there were photos from hotel check-ins, receipts, even voice memos where Carter joked about what they'd do if someone found out. And in one of the photos, in the background, almost invisible, was Lorna's wedding ring, still on her finger. I couldn't unsee it. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. Just sat there in the blue glow of the laptop, trying to piece together the version of my life that wasn't wrapped in lies. I knew I couldn't go back to her. That was done. But I also knew something else now. Carter wasn't going to stop. And Lorna wasn't his last. But maybe I could be his last victim. The next morning, I drove back to the house. Not because I wanted to see her. Not because I was ready to forgive anything. But because something inside me wouldn't sit still, not until I looked her in the eye and laid out every detail I had. I needed her to know I wasn't clueless anymore. That I wasn't the doormat she thought I'd always be. I wasn't coming for closure. I was coming for clarity. The garage was open when I pulled in. That alone set my stomach twisting. She always closed it. Always. Inside, her car sat parked at an angle, like she'd come home distracted and never corrected it. The lights in the living room were still on, though it was broad daylight. I stepped through the door and found her sitting on the floor in her robe, knees pulled up to her chest, as if she hadn't moved all night. She didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. I held up the flash drive and dropped it on the coffee table between us. Declan gave it to me. I said, voice low. I've seen the messages, the videos, everything. For a moment, she didn't speak, just stared at it like it might explode. Then finally, with a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said, I know. That's all. I know. I know you know, I snapped. That's the whole problem. You didn't just lie to me, Lorna. You let him train you. Like you were some new trophy he was molding into the next big tragedy. And you went along with it. Her eyes welled up. But I wasn't ready to let emotion rewrite what I'd spent the last 3 days unraveling. Did you know he did this before? I asked. Did he tell you about the others? She shook her head slowly. He said his last relationship ended badly. That she couldn't handle the pressure of his job. And that didn't raise any flags? I didn't want flags, she said. I wanted someone who looked at me like I wasn't fading. That broke something in me. Not because it was dramatic or poetic, but because of how pitiful it was. How self-centered. How childish. She burned our life down for a man who sent the same copy-paste messages to every woman who made the mistake of confiding in him. You were fading because you stopped seeing the value in what you already had, I said. You chased a spotlight and left me in the dark. But the worst part is, you never even looked back. She pressed her hands to her face and started crying. But this time, I didn't reach for her. I let her sit in it. You said in your letter you hoped I'd understand someday, I said. I do. I understand exactly who you are now. She tried to stand, but stumbled and sat back down. Her voice cracked. I don't want to lose everything over this. I laughed bitterly. You already did. You just haven't felt it yet. I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, I hesitated. There was still one thing left. One truth I'd held back. The one that might hurt her as much as she'd hurt me. So I said it without turning around. I'm not keeping this quiet. Not out of revenge. Out of principle. If you ever cared about the women he's going to do this to next, you'll back me when I forward all of this to HR. To legal. To every woman in that office. She gasped. You'd ruin his career? No, I said. He ruined his career. I'm just making sure he can't use yours as the wreckage he hides behind. I walked out without waiting for her reply. That night, I began writing my report. Not for Reddit. Not for drama. For documentation. For truth. But just before I hit send, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. A woman's voice. Is this Daryl? I was Carter's fiancé. I sat there frozen. She continued, her voice shaking. I found your number in his cloud backup. I need to talk to you. He told me you were a stalker. But I think he's done this to me too. I didn't speak. I just stared at the wall, realizing this story wasn't ending. It was spreading. Her name was Emily. And her voice, when she called, didn't sound like someone angry or broken. It sounded like someone waking up from a dream she didn't know she was in. She told me she had been engaged to Carter for 8 months. That he proposed after only 3, called her the calm to his chaos, and swept her into a life of luxury and promise. She said she never even suspected anything until she noticed charges on his card for hotels he never mentioned. Then she checked his backups. That's where she found everything. Pictures, messages, video clips, my name. We talked for over 2 hours that night. 2 complete strangers connected by a man who had played us both in different ways. There was no rage in her voice, just deep, bitter understanding. And I realized something as I listened. She wasn't calling to vent or confess. She was calling to do the same thing I was about to do. Stop him. Within a week, Emily and I submitted separate reports to the firm's HR department. Declan backed us both. The evidence was overwhelming. Messages sent during work hours, recorded meetings, inappropriate communications with multiple women, enough to make even the most indifferent company lawyer sweat. Carter was suspended immediately pending investigation. Within 10 days, he was terminated. But that wasn't the end. Lorna reached out again a few days later. Not to beg. Not to win me back. Just to say that she'd turned in her own resignation. I can't walk through that building anymore, she said. Not after all this. I told her I understood. I didn't say I forgave her. But I didn't hate her either. I don't think I ever really will. What she did wasn't just betrayal, it was her way of unraveling. I was simply the one who got caught underneath it. The divorce was civil. Clean. No yelling. No courtroom theatrics. She kept the apartment. I took the dog. We signed papers, shared one last quiet moment of acknowledgement, and parted ways like ghosts finally accepting they no longer haunted the same house. But here's where it turns. 3 months after everything settled, I took a trip, not to escape, but to breathe. Vermont had always felt like a cage after all that happened. So I drove south, no plan, just instinct. I stopped in North Carolina, stayed in a small coastal town with moss-covered porches and early morning fog. That's where I met Mara. She wasn't dazzling or dramatic or overwhelming. She was calm, steady. The barista at a cafe where I ordered the same coffee every day, and she remembered my name before I remembered hers. We talked. Slowly. Honestly. No masks. No sales pitch versions of ourselves. It's still new. Still growing. But for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm shrinking next to someone else's spotlight. I feel seen. Not because I was broken, but because I survived being broken and chose to rebuild without bitterness. I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I'll never be the man who stays silent while he disappears in his own marriage again. And I'll never ignore the quiet in a room full of laughter. Sometimes, the truth doesn't come in screams. Sometimes, it comes in a single sentence that changes everything. And this time, I listened.